Here we are back for part 2 of chapter 3. And let's see, we're talking about ethics in this class. So let's review very quickly. We talked about stakeholders inside the organization, which were employees, owners, and board of directors. And then we talked of stakeholders outside the organization, which fell into, if you remember correctly, this task environment right here. And then we looked at the general environment and the forces that affect the business environment. So that kind of wraps up what we began on, and our communities of inside and outside stakeholders. So let's start with the ethical responsibilities required of you as a manager, what to consider. And you will face some ethical dilemmas in the course of your career. So first you have to define ethics and values. Ethics are the standards of right or wrong that influence behavior, right? And quite honestly, they do vary between countries and between cultures. So we always have to be aware or cognizant of the values of each culture or country we're in. And ethical behavior is accepted as right or wrong according to these standards that come from our countries and our cultures. Values are relatively permanent. They're underlying beliefs and attitudes that help determine our behavior. We get our values from our families, our religion, our culture, our friends, our country. Everything comes together in us to create our value system, and from that value system we help create an organization's value system. And there are two important value systems that can conflict. And the first one is the financial performance. When you're a manager or an owner of a business, the priority is to make money. We want to be the best that we can. And the other one is the cohesion and the solidarity with our employees. We owe a responsibility to our employees. And sometimes these two definitely will collide. Another value system we have to look at is the social community. What type of responsibility or value system do we have for what is best for the society at large and our relationship with it? So here's a question. Influences in the general environment. Now this is from previous part 1, have no influence on a company or their success. True or false? Now, there are, according to the textbook, 4 approaches to deciding an ethical dilemma. How to consider ethical dilemmas. There's the utilitarian approach, which is for the greatest good. And it's guided by the result of the decision is what is best for the greatest number. And sometimes that can be questionable. We often use this when we define financial performance. The better our financial performance, the better it is for everybody at large. So ethical considerations are not put into play. It's good for the bottom line, but it can result in damages to workforce morale, and it can cause us to lose experienced employees, and we also affect the economy when this happens. So there's the individual approach, for your greatest self-interest long term. And if you take care of that self-interest in the long run, it will help others. It's guided by what will result in the best result for you long term. and under that umbrella, then everybody else is brought up. It's sort of the trickle-down theory. We went through it back in the 70s or 80s or whenever that was. Didn't work then, doesn't work now. You will basically act ethical in the short run to avoid harming others in the long run. However, one person's short-term self-gain, no matter how it is, sometimes not good for everybody in the long term. This is more of a justification. If we look at the moral rights approach, and that's respecting the fundamental rights of everyone has, it's guided with respect to the fundamental rights of human beings. Problems may occur, and I'm not sure that's really true, between the employer and the employee rights. I think that if you look out for the rights of all human beings, then you're also looking out for your own right, be you employer or employee. And then there's the justice approach and respecting impartial standards of fairness. This can sometimes be maybe too black and white. Because all situations are not black and white, and there has to be some flexibility. But one of the considerations is whether an organization's policies are administered impartially and fairly. And I think they're looking at the CEO's pay here is what they're talking about, and the pay of the average worker. And that's seen as an issue of fairness. And I believe there's more information about this. There's a very large gap here right now between these two. As I recall, there's some numbers in the book. We'll have to look at those. So, which approach above would you favor? And what is your reason? And if you don't prefer any of these, what approach would you prefer? That is going to be a discussion we have in class, so be thinking about that. If we look at why ethics is so important, I think if you look at the white-collar crime in the past 15 years, you can see why ethics needs to be focused on. We had Enron in WorldCom, we had Bernie Madoff with a $50 billion Ponzi scheme. We had the total collapse of our economy because of poor banking practices and investment practices. The 2001 Enron collapse created the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was supposed to negate or somehow neutralize the ability of companies to cook their books. And basically it didn't do much good because of in 2008 similar things happened with the banking industry and investment companies as compared to Enron. So I'm not so sure that this legislation here helped. But what is important is that we get back to ethics and focus on that in our business, because without ethics we do not have a stable business environment. You just think back to 2008 and what happened then. That can happen again unless we get our ethics in line and figure out an answer for the lack of ethics in business. There's a psychologist by the name of Kohlberg who says there are 3 levels of personal moral development. One is the pre-conventional. They tend to follow rules, obey authority, and managers tend to expect obedience for obedience sake. That's very similar to the parent-child relationship when they're very young. The child is very young. Just do as I say, don't ask why. The next level is conventional, and that's where people are conformists and they follow others' expectations, and managers lead by the encouragement and cooperation, which is a little more humanistic in viewpoint. And the final, or the third level, is the post-conventional. People at this level are independent and follow their own values and standards. Now, this gentleman is saying that most managers are at level 2 in moral development, and only about a fifth of American managers reach level 3. I would go one step further and say employees should also strive to reach the post-conventional level, not just managers. So how can a organization promote ethics? Well, one way is to create a strong ethical climate from the top down. Make sure that you do good background checks on your employees, that they have a fairly good, clean record. Make sure you have a code of ethics. I think if that's almost like these are our expectations, and if you know what the expectations are up front, then you have a standard to meet. And you want to reward ethical behavior, protecting whistleblowers. Not only that, but giving good examples from your managers. Your managers should be perfect role models for ethical behavior. And they're actually, when we talk about a whistleblower, a lot of people don't want to cause trouble because they fear for their job. Right now, there's a federal law that prohibits employers from firing people who report workplace hazards or whistleblow. And they may even receive a reward from the IRS if they tip off for tax evasion. But there's one thing that the federal law doesn't prohibit, and that is the treatment that whistleblowers get within the company. They may not be fired, but they may be ostracized, very much so, and they also may feel very uncomfortable after whistleblowing. So those are considerations to take. Those are things to take into consideration as a manager. Question: values and value systems are the foundations for ethics and ethical behavior. True or false? Another major question that is being asked in this chapter is: being socially responsible, is that really necessary? What do I care? I've made my bottom line. My stockholders are happy. The employees that I have are getting a good wage. What do I care about being socially responsible? That becomes an interesting question, because things that have been found about being socially responsible is, let's get down to these are the payoffs for being socially responsible. The effect on customers: 88% of respondents are apt to buy from a socially responsible company. Employees are more efficient. They're loyal. There's not as much turnover. The job applicant and employee retention is better. The effective sales growth is better because the word is out. Illegal activity technically does limit your growth. Company efficiency, they say there's less misconduct, so that the things go smoother within the plant or within the organization. Revenues usually go up. The stock price is usually higher. And again, profits are important. So those are the effects of socially responsible activity. So, if you go back to this question, is being socially responsible really necessary? Well, just looking at those, I would have to say yes, and I believe you would too. So what is being socially responsible? Corporate social responsibility. It's going beyond following the law and making a profit. It's going above and beyond. It's caring. Here is an example, and we're going to talk about this in class. Does it really have benefits? Okay, other than acts of selflessness for ourselves. And I want you to think of a highly profitable company that are successful, that do not, all highly profitable companies in most cases and legal entities do practice some type of social responsibility. It's very hard to find one that doesn't. So I'd like you to think of somebody who doesn't practice this and who are successful. Find some examples. And we go on, and then there were some opposing and supporting viewpoints. Milton Friedman, who is the god of the guru, I guess I should say, of the economy, economics for business, says that the only social responsibility of a business is to maximize profits. When that is done, the profits will trickle down into this society and make things better. Everybody will rise up. And then we have an economist, Paul Samuelson, that argues that a company must be concerned with society's welfare as well as corporate profits. And I like this. This is very true. Since businesses create the problems, they should help solve them. Often, businesses do have more resources than nonprofits, and being socially responsible gives businesses a favorable public image. So, weigh the pros and cons there. I'm not sure which side of the fence you're on, and we will discuss it. The University of Georgia has a business scholar by the name of Carroll, that asserts corporate responsibility rests at the top of the pyramid of corporate obligations. And here's his pyramid. At the bottom is a very large economic responsibility to be profitable. We've also got a responsibility to obey the law. We have a responsibility to be ethical. And we have a responsibility to be a good global corporate citizen, or, corporate social responsibility. And that's the very top. So it builds up. Types of CSR. One is being green. And I think we all know what that is. Believe it or not, Walmart is trying to be a very green company and have absolutely no waste. There will be no waste in their businesses. Everything will be recycled. They're also doing a lot of solar to heat and run their stores. And you can see that's going to be more profitable for them because it's going to cut expenses. And it's also good PR. So going green has good payoffs. Insurance companies can offer lower rates. Office buildings can increase natural light and reduce their utilities, raise productivity, and have fewer sick days. And hotels can save water and electricity by encouraging guests to reuse towels and skip vacuuming. So, you can see how that can lower the cost. Another type of social responsibility is philanthropy, not dying rich. I guess probably your biggest example of that is Bill Gates giving away his billions with his foundation, or Buffett joining Bill Gates. So, and we have Google, who is a company that says, do no evil. That's their motto, and make the world a better place. They reserve 1% of its profit and equity to making the world better. Types of, thinking beyond the profit and the law is exactly what they're doing, making the world a better place. So we kind of went through how these help a company, and how being a good citizen, global citizen, can affect the bottom line in a positive manner. And this is something we're going to discuss in class. How can I trust a company to know that it's doing the right thing? Well, you've got to look at the company corporate governance, yes. If you were to look at Enron, and really look at their top executive branch, you would have felt something was out of whack. There would have just been intuition if you were, working closely with them. So one of the biggest areas of concern is the independence of directors. Inside directors may be members of the firm, and outside directors are supposed to be elected from outside the firm. And this was a big downfall for Enron, in all honesty. Their board members didn't do their job. So you have to be very cognizant of how those board members are picked, and does the directors do their job, which is to make good decisions and sort of govern how the company executive branch manages the company. You've got to have trust in that company. So how likely the people you're dealing with are there to serve your interest, how much they demonstrate concern for others, how well they deliver on their promises, how much they try to keep their word, how effective they are in communicating these skills. These are all things that you look for. And it just takes a good eye and a little bit of reflection to really look and see how well a corporation is being governed. If we just take it at face value like they did at Enron, you're not going to see it. But you need to take time and truly look at the soul of that company to know if they're a good company. So, a final question, and that is, being socially responsible as a company pays off in the following ways. Okay, select all that apply. Thank you. That's the end of part 2. This will be Wednesday's classroom discussion.